Welcome back, everyone. This week's episode of the Great Outside Podcast here with Devil's Lake Tours, and we've got our guest this week is Nicole Stone. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I've gotten to know you probably over the last 3 years or so now, kind of when you first came up to Devil's Lake ice fishing. I want to say that was probably the winter of, I think it was 2018, so a little over 2 years.
Yes, I think so.
And so I just kind of wanted to get a little introduction on you, Nicole. You know, I know you do a lot of different things in the outdoor industry, and, you know, I know a lot of our listeners follow you and see all the adventures you've been on and places you go fishing and the companies you work with. And so I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to those that don't and aren't familiar with you to just kind of learn a little history on what you're about and what you do and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. So I currently run a little media business and I make websites, do social media. I work with a lot of outdoor companies and others, blogging, that type of thing, and also influencing, which is where people kind of know me from. And I kind of got here through a weird path, but I so I grew up on a farm, started fishing, you know, at a really young age, like 6 years or so. And then it just kind of evolved. It was part of my way of life. Never really thought anything of it. It was all I knew. But I also loved weather. So I went to school to be an atmospheric scientist and got my bachelor's degree in that. I did research in the clouds. So I took, planes through thunderstorms, which is kind of a unique path at that time. And then from there, I got hired by NDSU, became a surface measurement specialist, had a great job with the state, loved my job, loved my coworkers, was simultaneously getting a degree, my master's in natural resources. And then I was almost done with that, still loving my job. And one day I woke up because of a lot of factors and I was like, I'm done. I'm going to go do something else. I just wasn't in love with maybe the systems that were set up and with how, working in policy and management would have looked for my future if I wanted to expand into those areas. And I started writing for outdoor companies. I started getting involved any way I could with making websites, SEO, and I got more and more work. And now it's my full-time job.
Wow. And that's got to be a scary leap, just, going from a secure full-time job that you have every morning you wake up, is there to just I'm going to go chase what I want to do for the rest of my life. And there's no guarantees, but it's definitely a leap of faith that I know doesn't come easy, and it's not a very easy decision to come to.
No, it really isn't. I went from being super secure, the breadwinner in our household, to being poor again. But through that whole process, I knew I could do it. And it's really become something I never thought it would be at this point. And it's only growing. So as you know, because you've made your own leap, when you do this, that there's risks, but you have to decide if, the future of being excited about your job every day is worth those risks. And I think we find at our age, especially, that it is.
Yep. And, going through a lot of podcasts, I am a podcast connoisseur, and there's a quote that kind of sticks out with me. I know I'll probably butcher it, but one of them, the guy, he's out in Colorado, the Greg Bowman, and he always talks about, who is truly richer in life if you make $150,000 a year and barely have any time to spend with your family or go do the passions you do, or if you make $60,000 a year, but you have all this time to be able to go do those things. I mean, truly, what is more fulfilling in life? And I know for everyone, there's different answers, but for me, and I know you alike, just being able to have the opportunity to take those passions and, make a living with it and just enjoy those things is truly important. And I think in times like this, I mean, just being able to go sit on a shoreline and cast for pike and walleye, I mean, even if it's for a half hour, I think it really helps with this current situation going on in our world, and truly grateful that I've made that leap as well.
Absolutely. It's worth it. It's worth the adventure and the risk.
The
adventure's worth the risk.
And the greatest fear ever is the fear of the unknown. And sometimes you don't want to look back and regret not trying something. So it's definitely a lot of pros and cons, but I think ultimately in the end, it's always worth trying something, because at the end of the day, if things don't work out, you're just going to have to get a job somewhere.
Exactly. And I always think I have a security blanket because I have my degree, my work experience. That's not gone. It's just, it's there if I ever would need it, and it's worked out.
Yep. So, and I know in talking with you, fishing in Devil's Lake a few times, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you grew up in central Minnesota or somewhere in Minnesota. I remember talking to you about that here not too long ago.
And yes, I Central Minnesota. Yep. Right in the heart, the Wadena County area. I'm
Okay.
sure no one knows, but maybe.
So growing up, did you ever have the opportunity to travel over to North Dakota and fish anywhere, Devil's Lake, the Missouri River, places like that? Or is that kind of a newly found thing in the last few years?
Yeah. So I never, I always fished locally, and I never fished North Dakota until I moved to North Dakota in college. And then I really started fishing North Dakota once my husband and we got married, and we instantly bought a boat together. And then we're like, we're going to start fishing North Dakota. And we still aren't very good at it because, as you know, like the rules of Minnesota don't apply to North Dakota. It's totally different fishing, prairie lakes versus your central Minnesota deep basin lakes. It's a totally different game, but I love it. And obviously there's so much potential in North Dakota. So
There is. And just like, even with that, I try to get out and travel around and do some fishing at other bodies of waters, but it's really hard to do when Devil's Lake's sitting in your backyard. And it's just, you think about people that'll travel 8, 10, 12 hours and spend, 3, 4, even a week here. And it's like, it's tough to make the decision to go travel somewhere else and fish. But sometimes I think even doing that humbles you a lot in ways where you realize, we are pretty spoiled having this body of water back here. But I know, talking about like deep basin and stuff like that, that's one thing I've really realized fishing other lakes is, we fish pretty shallow here. You get to the summertime, things will change and we go deeper, but we have a pretty dirty water compared to a lot of other lakes. And I know that's a game changer when it comes to techniques and, things we do here will probably never work on a central Minnesota lake, because you can't be in 10 feet of water slip bobbering because you can see everything below you, and vice versa. So yeah, it's definitely a diverse way of fishing between just state border lines here.
Oh, it is. And that's kind of what's exciting about it. Like with Minnesota, I'm so used to having, there's perfect roads, perfect launches, perfect mapping with very little lake fluctuation. Like it's almost repetitive because everything is the same. And then you go to North Dakota, especially like Devils or the Missouri, and you're like, what's happening? Like the mapping is completely off, like 1 minute you're in 30 feet, the next minute you're in 1 foot of water. You know what I mean? The water is dirty. You can't see what you're going for, but that makes it really adventurous. And like those fish, I know Devil's Lake gets a lot of pressure, but like those fish, it's almost like there's a bigger abundance of larger fish in these bodies of water versus central Minnesota, where it's more thinly populated. There's less competition, plenty of resources, and then it's just tougher. And in North Dakota, you go to one of these lakes and you can just knock off big fish left and right. Like that's what I experienced with Devils one spring. I was like, this is like a dream come true.
Yep.
I would never central Minnesota. And you guys' walleye season never closes. So our walleye season never closes. It's crazy.
It's so unique, and we were just talking about this before we came on air about, Jason Mitchell's big walleye that could possibly have been the state record that she caught down in the Missouri. And I know that's one thing that drives a lot of people out fishing, whether it's, even hunting too. You get that opportunity. Like, you just never know when the next time you set that hook that it's going to be a big fish. And
yes,
sure, it to me, it doesn't matter if it's a 28-inch walleye or a 20 or a 15. Like, anytime I catch a fish and that rod's going, it's just something lights up into me and I'm like a little kid again. But yeah, I was thinking about, I remember some of the photos you had from a couple of springs ago when you and Matt had brought your boat up, and I don't even think the docks were in at 6 Mile Bay yet. And I know you guys went out and did some vertical jigging, and you guys caught a few beautiful walleyes that time of the year. And I'm sure there were still people at that time fishing on the ice, probably up in the northern parts of the lake, like Lake Irvin or Lake Alice. So that's one thing that's really unique about this body of water, whether it's fall or spring, is, we get that overlap where a lot of people have to wait for the walleye season to open up. And heck, as soon as that first little bit of open water opens up at a bridge, you can be out there with a long rod. And, it's from April 1st to March 31st, it's game on.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's what I love about North Dakota. And then like you guys have shore opportunities too. So one of the first times I was introduced to, fishing Devils was like people were just driving us around and being like, fish this shore, fish this bridge. And I'm like, this is wild. Like these are just ditches and stuff, and they're pulling up awesome fish. And it really equals the playing field, because a lot of times people that want to get started in fishing, they can't afford a fancy boat and they can't afford all, a trolling motor and all this technology. But they don't have to at Devils, especially in the spring. Like you can just bring your fishing rod and go catch some fish. So
it makes it, like, I like that. It levels the playing field, because, we've talked in previous podcasts about, how important it is to get the youth and other generations into this industry. And a lot of times there's barriers, whether it's, your family doesn't have that tradition of growing up in the outdoors. And so you don't have that person to guide you or lead you into it. And there's a lot of ways that those are getting opened up and those doors are getting knocked down. But even that barrier too, of like everyone sees, the really fancy boats and all the electronics and think that you need those things to catch fish, which you truly don't. And
Exactly.
we did a really cool YouTube series this last winter where we did a Have Boots Will Travel, where we kind of showed people how, you don't need a Ranger with tracks. You don't need a snow bear. You don't need all of this equipment. You can literally pull up on a shoreline, get out your ice auger, a sled, walk out 100, 200 yards from shore, find some structure and still catch fish. So I think having that ability on this lake, whether it's ice fishing or shoreline fishing like that, really helps level that playing field and give everyone an equal opportunity to get out there and enjoy what we so fortunate to have here.
Absolutely. That's what sets it. That's just what sets it apart, in my opinion, compared to so many bodies of water. It's just so much opportunity for everyone.
It does. And the way it's flooded too, it's the one thing I like about it is, you get North Dakota, as you know, it gets windy and people are always worried about getting blown off the
Always.
lake. And with our way the lake is set up and all of our public boat ramps, there's always a place to hide from the wind, or, people come up for a few days and they pull their boat and they're not comfortable going out in the wind and waves. You can go find a protected shoreline and still at least have a chance to get out there and wet a line and maybe find some fish for a fish fry.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's what I love it. That and just, yeah, the unknowns of like, you never know where you're going to find something new, where the fish are going to be, versus having this almost rigid structure of fishing in central Minnesota where I grew up, where, all right, the fish are down at the thermocline now. They're not going to come up, to the shallows until 7:00. Like, but that's not like that. I feel like all rules are off at Devils. And
It is. And like, even this time of the year, it doesn't really matter the time of the year, but like the crazy thing is you get in such a habit, like you're okay, from this date to this date, you're typically pitching or you got to be trolling cranks. And if you're not catching fish, where here you, like in the springtime,
exactly.
like I want to get out tomorrow and it's like I get out there and I could slip bobber for all day and catch walleyes. And the next day you could be like, you know what, I could totally just do something completely different and go pitch jigs or cranks on the shoreline and still do just as well. So it's like however you want to fish this body of water, you're able to do it in a lot of different ways. And I know last spring I was fishing a couple new places and everyone's like, in the spring, we want clear water. That's when the bite is best. And I'm like, well, where I come from in the springtime, you want to find the dirtiest stained water you can. And that's when you're going to find water. So it's just like, it seems like we're a totally different atmosphere up here.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why it's so much fun. And it's fun to mix it up and head up there.
It is. And I kind of want to touch on one of your first trips up to Devil's Lake. I don't remember if it was your first official one, but it was kind of that trip 2 years ago when we had you come up, do a little ice fishing with us, and kind of wanted to get your take on that whole experience. And that was kind of one of those, I called you out of the blue and I knew, you were just getting kind of into the industry and you were putting out some great content and you had your YouTube channel that was starting to go out, and it was like, this would be a perfect time to get Nicole up here and kind of in our back door, living 2.5 hours away. And it was a fun time.
It was a great experience. I learned more about the lake, especially the perch fishing, which was something I had never ice fished for perch up there before. So that was an entirely new experience right there. And then I met such amazing people, Dan from Clam, Zippy, who's still my really good friend and I go up fishing with now, you, Jason Mitchell. Like, it was just a really good opportunity for me to meet people, to learn more about the lake, to realize how absolutely amazing the fishing is, all winter as well. And it gets me excited to tell people about it and tell people to go up there, because it was a really good introduction with people that know the lake really well. That makes me love the lake even more.
Yep.
So.
And that just kind of tags along with this whole industry too. Like the people you meet and the stuff you get to learn from everyone, it only fosters the relationships even better. And I mean, there's not a day that I don't go on a boat with someone new, or even myself. And it's like every day you're constantly learning new stuff. And I think those kind of things, when you get to learn from some of the greats that have spent their entire life on this lake and have seen it go from 40,000 acres to 220 and back down to 160, and kind of just not necessarily learn so much the spots, but how to read spots and tackle spots and that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. One of the coolest things was I went up with fishing with Zippy later on must have been like late summer. And he took me back to one of those shallow lakes farther north. And it it was all backcountry fishing with, cattails and launching off a road that isn't really a road anymore. And it was just a crazy experience. And we were, trolling cranks through like 7 feet of water, something I would have never done. And it's not that trolling through cranks through shallow water is something I've never done. It's something I've never done in the middle of the day in tons of weeds. And that's exactly what we were doing. And it was, I learned so much about just strategy and everything with that lake. So having those opportunities to fish with those people that have so much experience, are such good anglers, really improves my angling ability everywhere I go and how to break down new bodies of water. And so that's been huge. That's
the best part. And, last week we were talking about passing those things on to whether it's, family or just other people that are in the sport. I think that's one of the most fulfilling things. And, like when you're up, I'm learning stuff from you on YouTube and social media and, tips and tricks like that. So it's not always fishing too that we learn when we go on these outings. It's a lot of other things that kind of get all tied into one thing.
Yes, it's awesome. That's what I love about everyone in the industry and just the opportunities that come about. You just learn so much from each other, which is how we grow just the sport of fishing. So awesome.
So Nicole, you've one thing I've been thinking about too is you've been pretty fortunate in the last year and a half, 2 years when kind of starting out your whole YouTube media company and been able to travel not only to Devil's Lake but to some other parts of the United States and even out of the country fishing in other places like Manitoba. And one thing we've been talking to everyone on this podcast about is just other places then they've been able to travel. Devil's Lake's always my home and it's always going to be one of my top 10. Actually, I can't say top 10. It's going to be my top 1 place to always fish and hunt. But, we always still love to travel, and being in the travel and tourism industry, it's always great to experience other places as well. And just wanted to kind of hear how you've been able to experience other places, whether it's been Manitoba or Minnesota, different fisheries, and some of your favorite memories over the last couple of years that you've been able to experience.
Yeah, so I was super lucky because Anna and I were able to work with Manitoba this last year. And so we got to do a lot of, adventures. And a couple of places we got to go in northern Manitoba is Wekusko Falls and Baker's Narrows. And those 2 places are out of this world. Obviously, they're super far. So like where Devil's is great is for a lot of us, it's, a day trip. But these 2 places were way, way up north, I think maybe 9 to 11 hours. So but the fishing up there is incredible. And like we got to do early ice with Brian Bogdan, who is an incredible angler. And we had the fishing of our life. Like at times we had so many fish, I'd say in the mid to low 20s, where we would have like literally, we didn't have a free hand because both hands were like pulling up fish at the same time. It was the most incredible fishing and one spot. Like he's got it dialed in, so he knows exactly, what humps on what lakes are active that time of year. Mm-hmm. And I've never experienced fishing like that where it's just you don't get a break. It's just nonstop, big fish after big fish after big fish. And then Baker's we got to do in the summer, and we got to do vertical jigging for lake trout, also something I've never done in my life. And you're just pulling these awesome Lakers up from 100 feet, and you're using like these, I don't know if they're like medium rods with fast action tips, something you would never expect for lake trout. And like you're just watching the tiniest bite, and then you just set the hook, and you're just getting, Laker after Laker. Again, something I've never had the opportunity to experience anywhere in the Midwest. And it was, those are 2 places, if people have the budget and the borders open and the time, they're wild. They're wild experiences.
Well, that's got to be like, that's almost like complete opposite ends of the spectrum, fishing for Lakers in 100 feet and then fishing for, not that they're tiny, but in comparison to a 30-pound lake trout, a 14-inch jumbo perch in 45 feet of water must feel like it's nothing coming up, but yet that's a big fish.
Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing how, I think we're really lucky just being involved with fishing. You and I both, like we can do all these opportunities where, you get to experience where catching a 14-inch perch makes your heart, rush. And then you can go up and catch a huge Laker, in 100 feet of water. Like it's awesome.
What I find so cool is I forget which guide I was talking to here in Devil's Lake, but it was not this winter, but it was the winter before. And I want to say it was Tom from Ace Hardware, Newbies Ace Hardware. And we were chatting a little bit, and he had a couple people on the snow bear with him. And I forget if he was from like Arizona or Nevada, but like in the hunting industry, there's different big things to attain, whether it's shooting all 4 species of bighorn sheep or, getting the 5 or 6 different subspecies of whitetails. And this guy had done a lot of those experiences. But one of his things was for his, just personal being, was to catch a true jumbo trophy class jumbo perch. And, he had any place in the world to go do that. I mean, you could go to Lake Cascade in Idaho, you could go to Giebig up in Michigan. And what he chose was Devil's Lake. And, he's traveled probably 1,400 miles to come have that experience with his son. And, those are the things that it's so hard to put into perspective until you start working in this industry, that, growing up here, like, you just took it for granted and went out, and then you start going to elk camp and you're showing your guides like the pictures of fish you caught this last year. And they're like, what we would be killed to have that kind of fish in our system. Like, a big perch for us is 10 inches. So just having those experiences of traveling around really puts things into perspective. And, guys will go travel that far to catch a trophy lake trout. They'll go catch muskie. And then there's the guys that'll travel that same distance to come catch perch or walleye and have that same exact experience in a different light.
Absolutely. And that's what's so awesome about it. And like in Devils, I think what was cool is you guys have like trophy pike, trophy walleye, and trophy perch. I mean, I read an article a couple years ago, some guy caught like a 52-inch pike on a fly or something from shore. Was that true? Like, that's wild.
Yep. That was actually Nathan LaFleur, local guy here. They are like the true epitome of like, they seek out pike, and whatever they do, they're doing something right. They've got a knack for it, whether it's ice fishing or open water. And yeah, he was fly fishing from shore. And again, it was kind of like the Jason Mitchell scenario, where they figured it was probably about this time of the year, maybe a few weeks later. And he caught it that night, took a couple pictures, put the tape and got the girth of it and the length, and released it back in the water, just because they were, they're very classy fishermen and want to make sure that the resources are there for other people. And I think it's great that people have that ability to, there's a lot of people that would have a hard time letting a fish of that quality go, but no, he released it. And even today with that kind of stuff, replicas of fish look just as good as a full fish mount. And if anyone else can have that experience of hooking into a big fish like that, I would be more than happy to let a fish go and have some other person have that same experience that fish provided for me.
Oh, that's amazing. Like, I think that shows a true advocate for the sport of fishing, for growing the sport of fishing, and just for conservation in general. And that's how you get people excited, because now they saw it and now they think they can go back and get it. I'm that person. I'm like, now I have to go fish up there. I might get a 52-inch pike, like,
yep.
That's how you fuel excitement. So I'm glad, people do that, because it makes a difference in both the conservation side of things and in just the public perception and opportunities.
It does. And it's, I'm a strong believer in CPR, the catch photo release, and, with camera quality and all that, you can get a pretty good replica done. And, when like it was a couple years ago, it was probably about the end of May, my dad and I were fishing, and we were in the north end of 6 Mile Bay, just pitching weed lines, and sandflies were out like crazy. And we got to this point that night, and we were about 5 minutes from calling. I'm like, once we get to the end of this point, we'll call it a night. We'll head back to shore. And he had caught about a 21-inch walleye. And about 5 minutes later, literally within probably 3 casts of calling it a night, I hit the weed line and went to go pull a crank up on my reel first time. And all of a sudden it felt like a snag. And I'm like, oh. And then within what felt like it was probably 10 seconds, which was probably just a millisecond, you felt the rod tip just move a little bit, and you got that little bit of like, that's a fish. And then the whole time, like, you're just, don't lose it. And then when you see it surface at the boat and you realize it's a walleye and your dad's there netting it. And that one was probably about, I think if I remember correctly, it was like 28.5, 29 inches. And I had already had a fish mount done, and we got a couple pictures of that fish. And one of the most probably enjoyable moments of my life was getting a picture of that fish, releasing it back in the water and watching it swim away, because
awesome.
That's a moment I'll have the rest of my life, no matter where I am, what I'm doing, that I will always remember. And if someone else can have that same moment with that fish, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. It's so good. And it sets up such a precedent for other people to put the big fish back, because now when they see you're doing it, like all these people that are doing it, it really helps them almost feel like, okay, this is what is expected. And then that just helps to not only like gets people excited to catch bigger fish, but it also promotes conservation the best way you can. Like I always think about conservation in the sense of you can like tell people to follow rules, And when you're not looking, they probably won't, but you can inspire people to follow rules, and then it's their choice, and then they're excited to do it, and they'll continuously do it forever. And that's when people are throwing big fish back, like you, like Mitchell, like the guy that, caught the pike, like I try to whenever I can. We're really setting up that precedent to help conservation, be accepted in the future.
Exactly. And, with today's media, with, Facebook and everything being instantaneous, I think is a very good lead by example. And, people will catch on to that and see that happening and feel good about it. And no, I really think it is a classy thing to do. And, there's nothing wrong with keeping big fish either, if you like, that's your one you want to put on the wall. But no, it's very fulfilling and rewarding when you watch them swim away. I mean, there's not always going to be opportunities where something may happen and that fish probably isn't going to survive if you catch them in deep water and stuff like that. But when you catch a 28-inch walleye in 4 feet of water and take a quick photo and are able to release it, and it's really feisty, and it's one of the best things I can say that happens when you watch them swim away.
Absolutely. That's awesome. I'm so glad you did that. And congrats on the fish. I remember
thank you
posting that.
Yep. Yeah, I think I remember that video because on that fishing report, right before I let the fish go, like halfway through it, you can hear me spit out sandflies, and that could kind of show you that it's not scripted. Like I'm in the middle of a fishing report and trying to get the fish, just show a quick video of it, release it as quick as I can, and sandflies are flying in my mouth. So there was no going back and redoing the video and just thinking forward.
That's awesome. Awesome.
So I just kind of want to see, Nicole, we're getting into springtime. We're getting our boats ready. As you can see, I'm sitting in my boat, just patiently waiting for this rain to stop so I can hopefully get out and try to find some springtime walleyes and have a fish fry. But, it's that time of the year we're starting to plan our trips. We're getting people that are calling, to once things kind of get pushed behind us and the dust settles a little bit, start planning trips up to Devil's Lake, and just kind of wanted to have an idea, what do you have anything big coming up in the next month or two on fishing trips and kind of what your summer looks like before we kind of sign off?
Yeah. So with the COVID thing, obviously I had a bunch of awesome trips, and those have all kind of disappeared like they have for so many people. But that I also look at that as now it's opening up opportunities for me to fish maybe more locally. Like instead of since, right now the border's closed, there's a lot of, questions about how much traveling you should do. So with respect to all that, I'm like, this is a great chance for me to really learn more North Dakota waters and put more time in and become a better angler on those waters. So like, I am excited to make more trips up to Devils this year and to the Missouris, Kakawea, and explore a lot of this North Dakota water. So I think for me, as things just progress through the summer and we see where everything ends up, I'm going to take this opportunity to learn my home state waters a lot better, and prairie fishing and all that, and improve my, I guess, not only my species count, but also just my techniques in that dirtier, shallower water strategy stuff that I find here versus at home, my home waters.
So. Oh, absolutely. No. And I think a lot of people are going to be doing that this year too, staying a little closer to home or making day trips and things like that. And I think that's one thing we're fortunate about North Dakota. I mean, you look at Fargo, 2.5 hours, the Devil's Lake, Grand Forks, you're here in a little under an hour. Bismarck, 3. And you and I alike, whether it's anyone else in this industry, we're diehards, and we'll get up at 4 a.m. and drive up and spend a day here and then drive right back, or we'll stay the night at the campground. I know I just heard that, like Graham's Island's starting to get some openings for reservations as we start to move forward. And, I plan on having Ryan up on next week from the state park to talk about the outlook with Graham's Island this summer. And it's one of my favorite places to launch the boat because you're so centrally located. And yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of people starting to learn some of their places that are right in their backyard that we often don't always take the time to appreciate.
Absolutely. And I think I'm excited for that because I either gravitate towards a lot of, obviously Devils falls into this, but I have a lot of big bodies of water that I love, right? Like Lake of the Woods, Rainy River, Leech, multiple bodies of water in Manitoba. And then I think these waters are great and they've produced me some amazing fish, but there's Devils, there's the Kakawea, there's, small lakes that will too. And they're so close, and I can, go out there, fish, enjoy some food, get some bait, come back home in the same day, support the local economy, and also, catch some massive fish. I just have to put in the time. So I'm excited to really dive into North Dakota this year, and try to not, when I talk home waters, I live in North Dakota, everyone, but my home waters are still central Minnesota, where I grew up. And so I'm trying to push away from, doing what's comfortable and really relearn these other bodies of water better.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I almost I think my attack on Devil's Lake this summer is going to be, I have my, 5-6 spots that I always go to. And, usually we'll catch fish there and find some fish for keeping and filleting. And I think this year is going to be my year to start to learn a lot more new spots, take more time with that. And, a guy told me one great way to learn this lake is go to your spot that you know will produce a fish or two, build that confidence, and then move on to other places. So you have that first fish under your belt for the day. So you're not 3 hours into a new spot, learning a new technique and kicking yourself, wondering what you're doing wrong. But you can look back and say, I got that fish for the day. So now anything is going to be a bonus and I can start to learn. So I think I'm going to take this summer to be more of a learning different parts of the lake and breaking it down. I don't do a lot of fishing on the east end of the lake. And, I'm sure some people are trying to understand what I'm even talking about, but like when you got 55 miles of water out here from east to west, you truly have like 4 lakes in one. I mean, I hardly get past Highway 57 or Highway 20 east of there. Everything's on the west side of the lake. So I'm going to make it one of those years to start learning a lot of those new spots and kind of building my repertoire that way.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And then you just learn so many new strategies because you're forced to. At least that's my big thing is like try new water. You always, like you said, you stick to what works and you just want to catch that fish. And then you try new things or you're simply forced to because you can't catch a fish. And then those tools you can take everywhere with you. Like, oh, I use, this presentation at this depth on Devils. Well, this lake, although there's no lake like Devils, it has a similar water clarity, setup more. And you can take that with you and use it there. Like it's the only way you can grow as an angler.
It is.
Stop being comfortable all the time.
And I had one of the most interesting experiences on a lake in Minnesota. This was probably 3 summers ago. A friend and I, he's got a cabin over there, and I was visiting him one weekend. And it wasn't really a fishing trip because it's not really a great lake for fishing. It's pretty much a recreational place. And of course, we don't really go out and jet ski or do stuff like that. So we put his little Lund Rebel in the water on a Sunday afternoon. And I mean, there's jet skis going by us and tubers. And I'm like, this works in Devil's Lake. This is a super clear lake. And I know the walleyes are pretty deep right now. It's like end of July. And I'm like, what do I got to lose? So I threw on a flicker minnow, purple one. And like 3 casts in by this dock, I hooked into a fish. I'm like, oh, it's probably a largemouth bass or, something like that. And get it up to the boat. And it's a 23-inch walleye. And I was so baffled. I'm like, why is this fish in this super clear lake doing up in the weed lines by the lily pads? And then you just learn stuff with that and adapt it to different bodies of water. And I think it just really helps you become a better angler all around.
Yeah, it does. That's the best part of it all. So I think for us, all of us that have had our plans change with the situation, we just have to take it as an opportunity to, really use our resources close to home.
Absolutely.
Which, yeah, we're lucky in North Dakota. We have a lot of good water.
We are. And, we got camping, we've got hotels, we've got bait shops that are open. And the best news I got this last week was that our boat ramps were all in as of Saturday afternoon. So, we're ready for open water fishing and to embrace summer of 2020.
That's awesome. And when did ice out exactly happen up there?
So about mid last week. So I was up fishing on the shorelines on Thursday, and there were still some places of ice, but we had about a half-inch rain that came through. I want to say it was Tuesday afternoon, and then the next day it got really windy, and that just really helped break up the ice and push it away. So I would say probably by about last Saturday morning, we were pretty much ice-free, and now we're completely ice-free and ready for open water.
Awesome.
Which seems like we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but up here it fluctuates so much. But we are probably up a foot with water, so that's great for spawning. And there's going to be a lot of great fish I think that are going to be caught in the next couple of weeks that you'll see pictures of. And everyone listening too, we started up this last week our weekly fishing reports that we'll be putting on YouTube and our website again. So we'll be trying to keep people informed that are coming up here and do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to have to book a trip up.
You are, and you'll have to let me know when you make it up here, and maybe me, you, and Matt can get out. And
yes. I
know he's been talking about it every time we get to a sports show and that we all need to get fishing together again, and I think we do.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, and count us in for this summer. We plan on coming up there quite a bit more. Last year he had one day that he took some family out. And we are, to be completely transparent, we're not great at fishing Devils. We just don't put in the time. normally, and we want to get better because we know the potential. Everyone does. And so he like caught 100 fish in like 4 hours, and he came home on cloud 9. And now it's like every weekend he's like, Nicole, we need to go to Devil's. And I'm like, next weekend. But now we're really excited to now that ice is out. So
yep. No, that's the stories I love to hear. I mean, just those experiences. There's not many bodies of water where you can go trolling, and like when you tell people, if you're here mid-July and you put a bottom bounce around with a spinner and you can catch 50 to 75, even upwards of 100 fish, like people don't believe it, but it's true. Like it can happen.
Yeah, he definitely, I mean, so he had taken my uncle and my brother with, who had never ever fished Devils before. And they are like, I think in their head, they think that's what it is like always. I mean, like we know like no body of water is that perfect, but they have multiple trips planned for this summer. So.
Well, good. I love hearing that. And we will definitely have to connect when you get up here this summer and spend a little time on the water together and see if we can't find a few walleyes that will cooperate for us.
Oh yeah. Count me in. I can't wait.
That's a deal. So thanks for joining, Nicole. I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to cover now that we kind of are getting closer to the end of this, and maybe we'll have to just do one on the boat someday when we're out fishing and do more of a technique one like we've been talking about with Johnny Candle doing as well, and just kind of adapting these podcasts as we get to the different points of the season and learning techniques and things like that.
I would love that. Yeah, let's definitely do a technique one. Anything to deal with science and new techniques, count me in. That's perfect.
We'll bring our cameras and get the action of the baits in the water and learn stuff and pass it on.
Pass it on. Love it.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Nicole, for joining this week on the Great Outside Podcast. And I wish you guys the best of luck here this spring and summer, and we'll stay in touch, and hopefully we can find a few days and spend some time on the water and enjoy this resource we have.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Tanner.
You're welcome. Have a great day.